hab meine kindersche Juren verbracht.
No program of Yiddish stories would be complete without acknowledging the fate of so many of the Yidden in Europe. And here's a story about that. One of the last remaining Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto was Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach Shapira. He was known as the Piaseczna Rebbe because it was in Piaseczna in Poland where he taught the children. He taught them how to live, how to act, how to keep their faith. And he wrote down his teachings in a book he called The Holy Fire. When the Warsaw Ghetto uprising was crushed and he saw the end was near, he took his manuscript and he buried it in the rubble of a bombed-out house. And then he was put in a cattle car where he was shipped to Auschwitz and later died. Many years later, a little boy found the manuscript. And he gave it to a soldier who saw the Hebrew writing, and he gave it to the chaplain, Rabbi Hollander. Rabbi Hollander published the book. This is how it began. When you find this manuscript, there may be no more Jews left in Poland. There may be no more Jews left in Europe. There may be no more Jews left in the world. But in Yerushalayim, there will always be Jews. Yerushalayim cannot live without Jews. Please, find the first Jew and beg him in my name to publish this book. And I swear to you, whoever will publish this book, whoever will learn these teachings, I will pray for them before God's holy throne. And that's the end of that part of the story, but it's not the end of the whole story, because many years later, another Hasidic rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach of blessed memory, found a copy of that book called The Holy Fire in a library, and he read it. And he wondered if any of the children that the Rebbe taught in the ghetto or in Piaseczna were still alive. This is his story. He was walking along near the beach in Tel Aviv when he saw a street sweeper sweeping. His body was all broken up and hunched over, but his face was beautiful. And Reb Shlomo, as he was known, came up to him and said, "Shalom Aleichem," and the man said, "Aleichem Shalom," in a sort of Yiddish, Polish accent. And Reb Shlomo said, "Are you from Poland?" "Yes," said Reb Shlomo. "Yes," said the man. "I'm from Poland, from Piaseczna." "From Piaseczna? Have you ever heard of Reb Shlomo Carlebach?" "Heard of him," he said. "I studied with him in his yeshiva from the time I was 5 until I was 11. And then I was shipped to Auschwitz. I was so tall, they thought I was 17, and they kicked me and whipped me, and I never healed, and that's why I look like this. Now, here in Tel Aviv, I'm all alone." "Please," said Reb Shlomo, "please, can you give me over one of the Rebbe's teachings?" "Teachings?" said the man. "You think you can be in Auschwitz for 5 years and still remember teachings?" "Yes, I'm sure of it," said Reb Shlomo. "Please." "Do you really want to know?" said the man. "Yes," said Reb Shlomo, "and I swear to you I will give over your teachings over all the world." And Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach could do this. He was a famous singer and storyteller and songwriter. The man went over to the drinking fountain. He washed his hands. He put on his jacket. He straightened his hat and tie. He came back to Reb Shlomo, and he said, "Can you imagine? Can you imagine the Rebbe dancing with hundreds, maybe thousands of children to greet the Shabbos?" And then the street sweeper began to cry. Never has there been such big tears. Can you imagine the Rebbe singing amidst the angels, "Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharei," singing to greet the angels? And the Rebbe taught Torah between the fish and the soup, between the soup and the chicken, and between the chicken and the dessert. Open your heart. And he looked at Reb Shlomo with piercing eyes as if he was about to give over the deepest, darkest secret. After every teaching, the man said, the Rebbe would turn to us and he would say, "Kinderlach, teure Kinderlach, Gedenksche, The größte Sache in the world, is to tina mitzvah tova. The greatest thing in the world is to do somebody else a favor. I was in Auschwitz. I wanted to kill myself. And then I would remember the words of the Rebbe. Gedenksche, the größte Sache in der Welt ist zu tun mitzvah tova. I would go from person to person. I would hold his hand and he would be crying and he would tell me about his wife and children who he would never see again until Mashiach is coming, until the Messiah comes. And then I would lose strength. And when I would lose it, I would think of the Rebbe's words and I could go on. Now here in Tel Aviv, I have no one. And sometimes I take off my shoes, I go over there in the water, I'm up to here in the water, I want to end it all. And then I remember the Rebbe's words. The greatest thing in the world is to do somebody a favor. The street sweeper picked up his broom, looked at Reb Shlomo and said, "Do you know how many favors you can do on the streets of the world?" And the holy hunchback street sweeper continued to sweep. This is another Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach story. I read it originally from him, but you can imagine my astonishment when I was in Krakow, Poland a few years ago, and I was touring an old cemetery with a rabbi, a very old cemetery. He was showing us around, and he showed us a faded, weathered, crooked gravestone, and he told a version of this story. Maybe it's true. Amos? There was once a miser by the name of Yossele. Of all the Jews who lived in that little ghetto, Kazimierz in Poland, in Krakow, only Yossele could afford to give tzedakah. And of course, he rarely did. Now, also in that little Jewish ghetto, that little Jewish quarter in Krakow, there was many shuls, but in this one shul, a man named Feivel waited until the mourner's kaddish was done. He made his way to the bima. He gave a klop. "Gentlemen, I've just come from Yossele's home. As a member of the Chevra Kadisha, as a member of the Burial Society, we thought we should tell you what occurred." We said to him, as many of you know, he's been very sick, and we said to him, "Yossele, you can't take your money with you. Give us 500 rubles. We'll make you a nice funeral, a nice burial, and the rest of the money we'll give to the poor." "I'll give you 50 rubles, Yossele croaked. "Then we won't bury you," we said. "Then I'll bury myself," he said. And with that, Yossele recited the Shema and died. "Well, I've come here today to ask for a minyan. Tomorrow at the cemetery." Feivel looked around. All of the men were rolling up their talisim and tefillin. "Gentlemen, gentlemen, a little rachmanis, you can have a little compassion." A man in the first row stood up and said, "Rachmanis, when my wife was sick, he gave me enough for a pill. You call that rachmanis?" And then another man stood up and said, "And what about when the cheder burned down?" "Gentlemen, the man still needs to be buried." From the back of the shul came a small, sneering voice. "Fair, let him bury himself." And with that, all of the men kissed the mezuzah and walked out the door. What was Feivel to do? Monday passed, Tuesday, Wednesday. Finally, on Wednesday, Feivel took pity on the poor man's body and he buried him in a little grave in the Krakow cemetery. He mumbled a few words and hoped all would be forgotten. The next day was Thursday. Thursday afternoon, there came a knock at the door. Rabbi Kalman. It was a poor Jewish woman. Were there any other kind? Rabbi, you've got to help me. There's a thief in this town." "Come in," said the rabbi. "Tell me, what's the problem?" "Well, every Thursday morning since my beloved Jacob died, olav hashalom, may he rest in peace, I received 5 rubles underneath my water bucket, Rabbi. But this morning, there was none." The rabbi promised to look into the matter and gave her some money. But no sooner had she left than someone else came. This time it was a man. "Rabbi, can you loan me some money for Shabbos so I can make a nice Shabbos for my family?" "Well, certainly," said the rabbi, "but I've never seen you here before." "How did you make Shabbos last week?" "To tell you the truth," said the man, "ever since my leg became lame and I couldn't work, there's been 5 rubles underneath my door every Thursday morning." No sooner had he left than someone else came, and someone else, and pretty soon every poor Jew in Krakow was crowded into the rabbi's little study. And they each told the same story of the missing rubles on Thursday morning. The rabbi quieted them down. "Shah! Shah! It was Yossele. It was Yossele. Yossele, you who lie in an unmarked grave, unmourned and lonely, Yossele, you who gave as God gives, secretly and unacknowledged. Salach lanu, Yossele, forgive us." And with that, the rabbi's head fell onto the table, as if he had died or fainted. And he found himself before the gates of heaven, and there was a man weeping uncontrollably, and one of the caretakers of the gates, an angel, was patting the man on the back. And the rabbi heard himself ask, "Who is that man? And why is he crying?" And the angel said, "His name is Yossele. He's been crying ever since he got to heaven. We don't know why. He lacks for nothing here in heaven. All he keeps saying over and over is, 'If I could just have one more Thursday morning. Just one more Thursday morning.'" And then the rabbi awoke. They erected a little gravestone over Yossele's grave, the one I saw maybe. And it says, "Here lies Yossele, the holy miser." Thank you.
Mein Städte